In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
The Stillest Hour. What happened to me, my friends? You see me distracted, driven away, unwillingly obedient, prepared to go, alas, to go away from you. Indeed, Zarathustra must return once more to his solitude, but this time the bear goes back to his cave without joy. What happened to me? Who ordered this? Alas, my angry mistress wants it. She spoke to me. Have I yet mentioned her name to you? Yesterday, towards evening, there spoke to me in my stillest hour. That is the name of my awesome mistress, and thus it happened. For I must tell you everything, lest your heart hardens against me for departing suddenly. Do you know the fright of him who falls asleep? He is frightened down to his very toes because the ground gives under him. And the dream begins. This I say to you as a parable. Yesterday in the stillest hour, the ground gave under me and the dream began. The hand moved, the clock of my life drew a breath, and never have I heard such stillness around me, and my heart took fright. And it spoke to me without voice. You know it, Zarathustra, and I cried with fright at this whispering, and the blood left my face, but I remained silent. And then it spoke to me again without voice. You know it, Zarathustra, but you do not say it. And at last I answered defiantly, yes, I know it, but I do not want to say it. Then it spoke to me without voice. You do not want to, Zarathustra. Is this really true? Do not hide your defiance. And I cried and trembled like a child, and I spoke, alas, I would like to, but how can I? Let me off of this, it is beyond my strength. Then it spoke to me again without voice. What do you matter, Zarathustra? Speak your word and break. And I answered, alas, it is my word. Who am I? I await a worthier one. I am not worthy even of being broken by it. And then it spoke to me again without voice. What do you matter? You are not yet humble enough for me. Humility has the toughest hide. And I answered, what has my hide of my humility not borne? I dwell at the foot of my height. How high are my peaks, and no one has told me yet. But my valleys I know well. And then it spoke to me again without voice. Oh, Zarathustra. He who has to move mountains also moves valleys and hollows. And I answered, as yet my words have not moved mountains. And what I said did not reach men indeed. I have gone to men, but as I have not arrived. Then it spoke to me again without voice. What do you know of that? The dew falls on the grass, and the night is most silent. And I answered, they mocked me when I found and went my own way. In my truth, my feet were trembling then, and thus they spoke to me. You have forgotten the way. Now you have also forgotten how to walk. And then it spoke to me without voice. What matters their mockery? You are one who has forgotten how to obey, and now you shall command. Do you not know who is most needed by all? He that commands. Great things. Great things is difficult, but to command great things is even more difficult. This is what is most unforgivable in you. You have the power and you do not want to rule. And I answered, I lack the lion's voice for commanding. Then it spoke to me again in a whisper. It is the stillest words that bring on the storm. Thoughts that come on dove's feet guide the world. O Zarathustra, you shall go as a shadow of that which must come. Thus you will command, and commanding lead the way. And I answered, I am ashamed. And it spoke to me again without voice. You must yet become as a child and without shame. The pride of youth is still upon you. You have become young late, but whoever would become as a child must overcome his youth too. And I reflected for a long time and trembled. But at last I said what I had said at the first. I do not want to. Then laughter surrounded me. Alas, how this laughter tore my entrails and slit open my heart, and it spoke to me for the last time. Oh, Zarathustra, your fruit is ripe, but you are not ripe for your fruit. Thus you must return to your solitude again. For you must yet become mellow. And again it laughed and fled. Then it became still around me, as with a double stillness, but I lay on the ground and sweat poured from my limbs. Now you have heard all, and why I must return to my solitude. Nothing have I kept from you, my friends, but this too you have heard from me, who is still the most taciturn of all men, and wants to be. Alas, my friends, I still could tell you something. I still could give you something, but why do I not give it? Am I stingy? But when Zarathustra had spoken these words, he was overcome by the force of his pain and the nearness of his parting from his friends, and he wept loudly, and no one knew how to comfort him. At night, however, he went away alone and left his friends.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Abracast. I'm John Tower. This is the Wednesday book club edition of the Spake Zarathustra. I think this is part 13. I'm recording this a little bit later than normal because for me it was last weekend, but for you it was 2 weekends ago. I busted out of town. I went to Point Pleasant, West Virginia for the Hillbilly Horror Stories, and History Goes Bump in the Night did a live episode right from the home of the Mothman. I went down there. I did the whole 9 yards. We went to the Mothman bar. I put the Mothman statue in a headlock. We stayed at the haunted historic Low Hotel. I didn't go to the TNT area. I didn't do that. And by the time I got into town, and by the time I checked out the next day, the Mothman Museum was closed. But I did do a lot of stuff. If you want to check out some of the pictures of that Mothman statue, it's great. It's like right in the middle of, quote, downtown, unquote, of Point Pleasant. And the thing's huge. I've seen a bunch of pictures of it. I guess I never realized how huge it was until I was trying to put it in a headlock. 2 o'clock in the morning, rampaging through Point Pleasant, hammered with Justin Rimmel from Mysterious Circumstances. Put a Mothman climbing all over the Mothman statue. Sounds like a regular old Saturday night to me. Anyhow, so we're continuing to, I think we're on the backstretch finally. We're, that Stillest Night or the Stillest Hour was the last part of the second part. It was the last speech on the second part. So that's why I did it in the cold open. So the proper episode of this is starting the third part of Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra. We're just going to get right into it. It was so cool hanging out with Justin and those guys. If you like mysterious podcasts, true crime podcasts, that kind of stuff, check out Mysterious Circumstances. All right, so Zarathustra left his buddies. Oh, by the way, that cold open was great. You know, it's like a man, a guy wrestling with his will, right? It's a guy wrestling with his will and his conscience. And he says, I'm not worthy even of being broken by it. It's very cool. So Zarathustra leaves, and the next speech here is The Wanderer. It was about midnight when Zarathustra started across the ridge of the island so that he might reach the other coast by early morning. For there he wanted to embark. There he would find a good roadstead where foreign ships too light to anchor. And they often took along people who wanted to cross the sea from the Blessed Isles. Now, as Zarathustra was climbing the mountain, he thought of how often since his youth he had wandered alone and how many mountains and ridges and peaks he had already climbed. I am a wanderer on the mountain and a mountain climber, he said to his heart. I do not like the plains, and it seems I cannot sit still for long. And whatever may yet come to me as destiny and as experience will include some wandering and mountain climbing. In the end, one experiences only oneself. The time is gone when mere accidents could still happen to me. And what could still come to me now that was not mine already? What returns and what finally comes home to me is my own self. And what of myself has long been in strange lands and scattered among all things and accidents. And one further thing I know, I stand before my final peak now, and before that which has been saved up for me the longest. Alas, now I must face my hardest path. Alas, I have begun my loneliest walk. But who is of my kind cannot escape such an hour, the hour which says to him, only now you are going your way to the greatest peak in the abyss. They are now joined together. You are going your way to greatness. Now, that which has hitherto been your ultimate danger has become your ultimate refuge. You are going your way to greatness. Now, this must give you the greatest courage that there is no longer any path behind you. You are going your way to greatness. Here nobody shall sneak after you. Your own foot has effaced the path behind you. And over it there is written impossibility. And if you climb now lack all ladders, then you must know how to climb on your own head. How else would you want to climb upwards? On your own head in a way over your own heart. Now, what does the gentlest in you must still become the hardest. And he who has always spared himself much will in the end become sickly of so much consideration and praise to be what hardens. Yes. I do not praise the land where butter and honey flow. One must learn to look away from oneself in order to see much. This hardness is necessary for every climber of the mountain, but the lover of knowledge who is obtrusive with his eyes. How could you see more of all things than their foregrounds? But you, O Zarathustra, wanted to see the ground and the background of all things. Hence, you must climb over yourself, upwards, up until even the stars are under you. Indeed, to look down upon myself and even upon my stars, that alone I shall call my peak. That has remained for me as my ultimate peak. Thus spoke Zarathustra to himself as he was climbing, comforting his heart with hard maxims. For his heart was sore as never before. And when he reached the height of the ridge, behold, the other sea lay spread out before him, and he stood still and remained silent a long time. But the night was cold, and this height clear and starry and bright. I recognize my lot, and finally said sorrowfully, well, I am ready now. My ultimate loneliness has begun. Alas, this black, sorrowful sea below me. Alas, this pregnant, nocturnal dismay. Alas, destiny, and sealed to you, I must now go down. Before my highest mountain I stand, and before my longest wandering to the end, I must first go down deeper than ever I descended. Deeper into pain than ever I descended down into its blackest flood. Thus my destiny wants it. Well, I am ready. Whence come the highest mountain? I once asked. Then I learned that they come out of the sea. Then evidence is written in their rocks and in their walls of their peaks, and it comes out to the deepest depth, that the highest must come to its height. Thus spoke Zarathustra on the peak of the mountain, where it was cold, and when he came close to the sea, and at last stood alone among the cliffs, he had become weary from walking, and even more fully from longing than before. Everything is still asleep now, he said. Even the sea is asleep, drunk with sleep, and strange it looks to me. But its breath is warm, and I feel. And I also feel that it is dreaming. It is dreams it tosses on hard pillows. And listen how it groans with evil memories or evil forebodings. Alas, I am sad with you, you dark monster, and even annoyed with myself for your sake. Alas, that my hand does not have strength enough. Verily, I should like to deliver you from evil dreams. So it's clear here he's going into his subconscious. A lot of times when you're dreaming, the water, is just the surface. But what's under it is the subconscious. I bet you dollars to donuts. That's what Zarathustra's talking about here. He's all this dreams and unconscious and black sea business. And thus, as Zarathustra was speaking thus, he laughed at himself in melancholy and bitterness. What Zarathustra has said, would you sing comfort even to the sea? O you loving fool Zarathustra, you are trust over full. But thus have you always been. You have always approached everything terrible trustfully. You have wanted to pet every monster, a whiff of warm breath, a little soft tuft on the paw. And at once you are ready to love and to lure it. Love is the danger of the loneliness, love of everything. If only it is alive, laughable, verily are my folly and my modesty and love. Thus spoke Zarathustra and laughed for the second time. But then he recalled his friends whom he had left, and as if he had wronged them with his thoughts, he was angry with himself for his thoughts. And soon it happened. that he who had laughed wept from the wrath, and the longing Zarathustra wept bitterly. On the vision and the riddle. When I got abroad among the sailors that Zarathustra was on board, for another man from the Blessed Isles had embarked with him, there was much curiosity and anticipation. But Zarathustra remained silent for 2 days, and was cold and deaf from sadness, and answered neither glances nor questions. But on the evening of the second day he opened his ears again, although he still remained silent, for there was much that was strange and dangerous to be heard on the ship, which came from far away and wanted to sail even farther. But Zarathustra was a friend of all who traveled far, and do not like to live without danger. And behold, eventually his own tongue was loosened as he listened, and the ice of his heart broke. Then he began to speak thus: to you, the bold searchers, researchers, and whoever embarks with cunning sails on terrible seas, to you, drunk with riddles, glad of the twilight, whose soul flutes lure astray in every whippoorwill, because you do not want to grope along a thread with cowardly hands, and where you can guess, you hate to deduce. To you alone I tell the riddle that I saw, the vision of the loneliest. Not long ago, I walked gloomily through the deadly pallor of dusk, gloomy and hard, with lips pressed together, and not only one sun had set for me a path that ascended defiantly through the stones, malicious, lonely, not cheered by herb or shrub, a mountain path crunched under the defiance of my foot, striding silently over the mocking clatter of pebbles, crushing the rock that made it slip. My foot forced its way upward, defying the spirit that drew it downward towards the abyss. The spirit of gravity, my devil and arch enemy. Upward, although he sat on me, half dwarf, half mole, lame, making lame, dripping, led into my ear, leaden thoughts into my brain. O Zarathustra, he whispered mockingly, syllable of syllable, you philosopher's stone, you threw yourself up high, but every stone that is thrown must fall. O Zarathustra, you philosopher's stone, you sling stone, you star crusher. You threw yourself up so high, but every stone that is thrown must fall. Sentenced to yourself and to your own stoning. O Zarathustra, far indeed have you thrown this stone, but it will fall back on yourself. And then the dwarf fell silent. This reminds me of the jester that was on the back of the... I imagine it's obvious, right? The jester that was on the back of the tightrope walker in the introduction. Then the dwarf fell silent, and that lasted a long time. His silence, however, oppressed me. With such twosomeness is surely more lonesome than being alone. I climbed and I climbed. I dreamed and I thought, but everything oppressed me. I was like one sick whom his wicked torture makes weary, and who, as he falls asleep, is awakened by a still more wicked dream. And there is something in me that I call courage. that has so far slain my every discouragement. This courage finally bade me to stand up and speak. Dwarf, it is you or I. For courage is the best slayer, courage which attacks. For in every attack there is a playing and brass. Man, however, is the most courageous animal. Hence, he overcame every animal. With playing and brass, he has so far overcome every pain. But human pain is the deepest pain. Wow, that's prolific, right? Man, however, is the most courageous animal. It's like animals, they don't have conscience. They don't have an idea of the future. They don't have an understanding that they're going to die. Man does. Man does that. Man understands that they're going to die. Man understands what the future means. Man also understands that there's shit that's out there that will fuck them up. Courage also slays dizziness at the edge of the abysses. And where does man not stand at the edge of abysses? And is not always seeing abysses. Courage is the best slayer. Courage slays even pity. But pity is the deepest abyss. Sorry, I need a little bit of administration time. As deeply as man sees into life, he also sees into suffering. Courage, however, is the best slayer. Courage which attacks, which slays even death itself. For it says, was that life? Well then, once more. In such words, however, there is much playing and brass. He that has ears to hear, let him hear. All right, we're just going to go. Part 2. Stop, dwarf, I said. It is I or you, but I am the stronger of us two. You do not know my abysmal thought that you could not bear. Then something happened that made me lighter, for the dwarf jumped from my shoulder, being curious, and he crouched on a stone before me. But here there was a gateway just where we had stopped. Behold this gateway, dwarf, I continued. This is so politically incorrect. Behold this gateway, little person, I continued. It has two faces. Two paths meet here. No one has yet followed either to its end. This long lane stretches back for an eternity, and the long lane out there, that is another eternity. They contradict each other, these paths. They offend each other's face to face. And it is here that this gateway, that they come together, and my name of the gateway is inscribed above, Moment. But whoever would follow one of them on, further and further, do you believe, dwarf, that these paths contradict each other eternally? All that is straight lines, the little person murmured contemptuously. All truth is crooked. Time itself is a circle. So I've told this story a billion times probably in these episodes, but this right here is what led me to do Thus Spake Zarathustra. As I was watching the first season, you know, that really good season of True Detective on HBO, and Matthew McConaughey, Rushton Cole, and Woody Harrelson were like assaulting the compound where these guys were like cooking meth or whatever, and like I think his name was like Reggie Ledoux. Rushton Cole pushed the guy out on the ground onto his knees, and he's got a gun to his head. And the guy, Reggie Ledoux, goes, "Time is a flat circle." And Rushton Cole looks at me and goes, "What is that, Nietzsche, you fuck?" And I'm like, time is a flat circle. What is that all about? And so I started reading about Nietzsche's eternal reoccurrence, which we're actually, in the narrative of the book, we're in the middle of another instance of eternal reoccurrence where Zarathustra retires back to his mountain. This is again this would be the third time in the narrative, but it's hinted at that he's come down off the mountain before in the introduction of the first part of it. So that time is a flat circle stuff. I just sort of wanted to explain why I got a kick out of it. Back to it. You spirit of gravity, I said angrily, do not make things too easy for yourself, or I shall let you crouch where you are crouching, lame foot. And it was I that carried you to this height. Behold, I continued, for this moment, from this gateway moment, a long eternal lane leads backwards. Behind us lies an eternity. Must not whatever can walk have walked on this lane before? Eternal reoccurrence. Must not whatever can happen have happened, have been done, have passed by before? And if everything has been there before, what do you think, dwarf, of this moment? Must not this gateway too have been there before? And are not all things knotted together so firmly that this moment draws after it all that is to come? Therefore itself too, and whatever can walk in this long lane out there too, it must walk once more. And this slow spider which crawls in the moonlight, and this moonlight itself, and I and you in this gateway whispering together, whispering of eternal things, must not all of us have been here before and return and walk in that other lane out there before us? In this dreadful lane must we not eternally return? Thus I spoke more and more softly, for I was afraid of my own thoughts and the thoughts behind my thoughts, and suddenly I heard a dog howl nearby. Had I ever heard a dog howl like this? My thoughts raced back. Yes, when I was a child, in the most distant childhood, I heard a dog howl like that, and I saw him too, bristling his head up, trembling in the stillest midnight, and even dogs believe in ghosts. And I took pity, for just then the full moon, silent as death, passed over the house. Just then I stood still, around glow, still on the flat roof, as if on another's property. That was why the dog was terrified, for dogs believe in thieves and ghosts, and when I heard such howling again, I took pity again. Where was the dwarf gone now? And the gateway, and the spider, and all the whispering. Was I dreaming then? Was I waking up? Among wild cliffs I stood suddenly alone, bleak in bleakest moonlight, and there lay a man, and there the dog jumping, bristling, whining. Now he saw me coming, and he howled again, and he cried, and I had ever heard a dog cry like this for help, and verily what I saw I had never seen the like. A young shepherd I saw writhing and gagging in spasms, his face distorted, and a heavy black snake hung out of his mouth. Had I ever seen so much nausea and pale dread on the face? He seems to have been asleep when the snake crawled into his throat, and there bit itself fast. And my hand tore at the snake and tore in vain. It did not tear the snake out of his throat, but it cried out of me, "Bite, bite its head off, bite." Thus I cried out of me, my dread, my hatred, my nausea, my pity. All that is good and wicked in me cried out of me with a single cry. You bold ones who surround me, you searchers, researchers, and whoever among you have embarked with cunning sails on unexplored seas. You who are glad of riddles, guess me the riddle that I saw. interpret me the vision of the loneliness, for it was a vision and a foreseeing. What did I see then in a parable? And who is it who must come and yet come one day? And who is the shepherd into whose throat the snake crawled thus? And who is the man into whose throat all that is the heaviest and blackest will crawl thus? This shepherd, however, bit as my cry counseled him, and he bit with a good bite. And far away he spewed the head of the snake, and he jumped up, no longer a shepherd, no longer human, one changed, radiant, laughing. Never yet on earth has a human being laughed as he laughed. Oh, my brothers, I have heard laughter that was no human laughter, and now a thirst gnaws at me, longing that never grows still. My longing for this laughter gnaws at me. Oh, how do I bear to go on living, and how could I bear to die now? Thus spake Zarathustra.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content and access to the private Abracast workgroup by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com. On this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode,
hear the names of white men and others who, it was said, had also met or seen these creatures. She went after these persons too and found out that in due course that it was so, and they in turn had not been saying anything for fear of ridicule. I withhold their names too, as I do not have permission of any to publish them. Said human kids on reaching the age of reason turned out not to want to talk about this abomination, while their parents were most definitely did not and do not want to talk about it. Nonetheless, they have talked a bit, and I pass it on to you for what it is worth. We've made 5 investigation trips and have, for evidence, a fingerprint lifted off a house window, including a plaster cast of a footprint, personal taped accounts of the creature, plus many interviews. This includes photographs. He is 7 feet tall, 400 pounds. That's a big motherfucker. Can move at tremendous speeds, jump tremendous distances. No news items concerning this being have been printed in the Portland papers. He displays extreme cunning, walks and runs. Whoa, this is personal. He displays extreme cunning. He walks and runs erect. Appears frustrated. Acts as if he would like to communicate. He makes extremely high-pitched sounds. But if you want to stay till afterwards, I'll tell you I've never talked about this. I told my wife about it last night at a campfire while I was deciding what I was going to do with this episode. So I've never told any very literally a fraction, like maybe 3 other human beings, this story. But I'll tell you my fucking Bigfoot story if you hang on after this.
support the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
On involuntary bliss, with such riddles and bitterness in his heart, Zarathustra crossed the sea. But when he was 4 days away from the Blessed Isles, and from his friends he had overcome all his pain, triumphant, and with firm feet he stood on his destiny again. And then Zarathustra spoke to his jubilant consciousness. I'm alone again, and I want to be so. Alone with the pure sky and the open sea. Again, in the afternoon around me. It was in the afternoon that I once found my friends for the first time. It was afternoon for the second time, too. In the hour when all light grows quieter, for whatever of happiness is still on its way between heaven and earth. Now seek a shelter in a bright soul. It is from happiness that all light has grown quieter. O afternoon of my life, once my happiness too descended to the valley to seek shelter, and found those open, hospitable souls. O afternoon of my life, what have I not given up to have one single thing? This living plantation of my thoughts and this morning light of my highest hope. Companions the Creator once sought in the children of his hope. And behold, it turned out that he could not find them unless he created them himself. Thus, I'm in the middle of my work, going to my children and returning from them. For his children's sake, Zarathustra must perfect himself. For from the depths one loves only one's child and work. And where there is a great love of oneself, it is the sign of pregnancy. Thus I found it to be. My children are still verdant in their first spring, standing close together and shaken by the same winds. The tree of my gardens and my best soil. And verily, where such trees stand together, there are blessed isles. But one day I want to dig them up and place each by itself, so it may learn solitude and defiance and caution, and gnarled and bent. Who is calling me? And with supple hardness it shall then stand by the sea, a living lighthouse of invincible life. Where the storms plunge down into the sea and the mountain stretches out of its trunk for water, there everyone knows shall once have his day and night watches for this testing and knowledge. He shall be known and tested whether he is of my kind and kin, and whether he is the master of a long will, taciturn even when he speaks, and yielding so that in giving he receives, so that he may one day become my companion and a fellow creator and a fellow celebrant of Zarathustra, one who writes my will on the tablets to contribute to the greater perfection of all things, and for his sake and the sake of those like him, I must perfect myself. Therefore, I now evade my happiness and offer myself to all unhappiness for my final testing and knowledge. And verily, it was time for me to leave in the wanderer's shadow and the longest boredom and the stillest hour. They all urged me. It is high time. The wind blew through my keyhole and said, "Come cunningly." The door flew open and said to me, "Go." But I lay there chained to the love for my children. Desire set this snare for me, desire for love, that I might become my children's prey and lose myself to them. Desire, this means to me to have lost myself. I have you, my children. And in this experience, everything shall be security and nothing desire. But brooding, the sun of my love lay on me. Zarathustra was cooking in his own juice. Ugh. And shadows and doubts flew over me. I learned for frost and winter. Oh, that frost and winter might make me crack and crunch again, I sighed. Then icy mists arose from me, past burst its tomb. Many a pain that had been buried alive awoke, having merely slept hidden in burial shrouds. Thus, everything called out to me in signs, "It is time." But I did not hear. Until at last my abyss stirred and my thoughts bit me, alas, abysmal thought that is my thought. When shall I find the strength to hear you burrowing without trembling any more? My heart pounds to my very throat whenever I hear you burrowing. Even your silence wants to choke me. You who are so abysmally silent, as yet I have never dared to summon you. It was enough that I carried you with me. As yet I have not been strong enough for the final overbearing, prankish bearing of the lion. Your gravity was always terrible enough for me. But one day I shall yet find the strength and the lion's voice to summon you. This is the second, just in this episode, that he's talked about this lion's voice. The first one, when he was talking about, he did not have the lion's voice to command. So he's saying that one day I will find the strength to command. It's interesting, because another prerequisite to that in that speech was all about humility, being humble. And once I have overcome myself that far, then I also want to overcome myself in what is still greater, and a victory shall seal my perfection. Meanwhile, I still drift on uncertain seas. Smoothed tongue accident flatters me forward and backwards, and I look and I still see no end. As yet the hour of my final struggle has not come to me. Or is it coming just now? Verily, with treacherous beauty, the sea and life look at me. O afternoon of my life, O happiness before evening, O heaven on the high seas, O peace in uncertainty, how I mistrust all of you. Verily, I am mistrustful of all your treacherous beauty. I am like the lover who mistrusts the all too velvet smile, as he pushes his most beloved before him, tender even in his hardness and jealous. Thus I push this blessed hour before me. Away with you, blessed hour, with you bliss came to me against my will. Willing to suffer my deepest pain, I stand here. You came at the wrong time. Away with you, blessed hour. Rather seek shelter there with my children and hurry and blessed them before evening with my happiness. There, evening approaches even now. The sun sinks, gone my happiness. Thus spoke Zarathustra, and he waited for the unhappiness the entire night. But he waited in vain. The night remained bright and still, and happiness itself came closer and closer to him. Towards the morning, however, Zarathustra laughed in his heart and said mockingly, "Happiness runs after me. That is because I do not run after women, for happiness is a woman."
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review. On this month's exclusive Order of the Fellowcraft episode,
to hear the names of white men and others who, it was said, had also met or seen these creatures. She went after these persons too and found out that in due course that it was so, and they in turn had not been saying anything for fear of ridicule. I withhold their names too, as I do not have permission of any to publish them. Said human kids on reaching the age of reason turned out not to want to talk about this abomination, while their parents were most definitely did not and do not want to talk about it. Nonetheless, they have talked a bit, and I pass it on to you for what it is worth. We've made 5 investigation trips and have, for evidence, a fingerprint lifted off a house window, including a plaster cast of a footprint, personal taped accounts of the creature, plus many interviews. This includes photographs. He is 7 feet tall, 400 pounds. That's a big motherfucker. Can move at tremendous speeds, jump tremendous distances. No news items concerning this being have been printed in the Portland papers. He displays extreme cunning, walks and runs. Whoa, this is personal. He displays extreme cunning. He walks and runs erect. Appears frustrated. Acts as if he would like to communicate. He makes extremely high-pitched sounds. But if you want to stay till afterwards, I'll tell you I've never talked about this. I told my wife about it last night at a campfire while I was deciding what I was going to do with this episode. So I've never told any very literally a fraction, like maybe 3 other human beings, this story. But I'll tell you my fucking Bigfoot story if you hang on after this.